My husband's mother made me leave our expensive 12K month home. Here's what happened next. I never imagined that my life could turn upside down so quickly. My husband, Mark, and I were living in a luxurious 12,000 a month home, nestled in a prestigious neighborhood. It was the epitome of success, or so I thought. We had everything we could ever want: spacious rooms, a beautiful garden, and the latest modern conveniences. But all of that changed when my husband's mother, Susan, came to stay with us. Susan had always been a bit overbearing, but I never anticipated the extent of her influence over my husband. It started with small things, like her rearranging the furniture or criticizing the way I managed the household. I tried to brush it off, thinking she was just trying to be helpful in her own way, but soon her behavior escalated. She began to undermine me at every turn, making snide comments about my cooking, my housekeeping, and even the way I dressed. Mark seemed oblivious to her behavior, or perhaps he just didn't want to confront his mother. I felt increasingly isolated in my own home, as if I were a guest rather than the lady of the house. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, Susan dropped a bombshell. "You know, Mark," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "I think it might be best if you two found a smaller, more manageable place to live. This house is just too much for her to handle." I couldn't believe my ears. I stared at her, my mouth agape. Mark, to my shock, seemed to consider her suggestion seriously. "Maybe she's right," he said slowly, looking at me. "You've been so stressed lately. A smaller place might be better for both of us." My heart sank. I had worked so hard to make this house a home, and now, in an instant, it felt like it was slipping away. Despite my protests, Mark seemed to side with his mother more and more each day. It wasn't long before we were packing up our belongings and moving into a much smaller, more modest home on the outskirts of the city. The new house was a far cry from the opulence we had once enjoyed. It was cramped, and the neighborhood was nowhere near as prestigious, but I tried to make the best of it. I threw myself into decorating the new place, trying to create a sense of warmth and comfort. However, Susan's influence didn't wane. She continued to visit frequently, and her criticisms only intensified. Mark grew increasingly distant, and I felt like a stranger in my own life. It seemed like everything I did was wrong in Susan's eyes, and Mark rarely stood up for me. One particularly difficult evening, I reached my breaking point. Susan had made yet another disparaging comment about my cooking, and Mark had remained silent. I couldn't take it anymore. "Why are you letting her do this to us?" I demanded, tears streaming down my face. "This isn't the life we dreamed of." Mark looked at me, a mixture of guilt and confusion in his eyes. "I don't know," he admitted. "I just want everyone to be happy." "But I'm not happy," I said quietly. "I can't keep living like this." The next few weeks were a blur of arguments and soul-searching. Mark and I had to confront some harsh truths about our relationship and the impact his mother was having on our lives. It wasn't easy, but eventually, Mark realized that he had to set boundaries with Susan if we were going to have any chance at salvaging our marriage. We had a difficult conversation with Susan, explaining that her constant interference was damaging our relationship. She didn't take it well, and there were many tears and harsh words. But in the end, Mark stood by me, and we made it clear that we needed space to rebuild our lives together. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. Mark and I started to reconnect, and we worked hard to create a sense of unity and stability in our new home. It wasn't the grand mansion we had once lived in, but it became our sanctuary, free from the toxic influence that had nearly torn us apart. Looking back, I realized that the most important thing wasn't the house or the neighborhood, but the love and respect we had for each other. Susan's interference had forced us to confront some deep-seated issues in our relationship, and ultimately, it made us stronger. We learned to stand up for ourselves and prioritize our own happiness, even in the face of familial pressure. Our new home became a symbol of our resilience and our commitment to each other. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was a life we built together, and that made it all the more precious. Our struggle to rebuild. As we settled into our new home, the initial relief was quickly replaced by a sense of loss and uncertainty. The spacious rooms and luxurious amenities of our old house had been a comforting buffer against the world's chaos, and now we had to adapt to a much smaller, simpler space. The financial strain of maintaining such an expensive home was gone. But so was the sense of security it provided. Mark and I decided to take this as an opportunity to reevaluate our priorities. We spent more time together, talking about our dreams and fears, something we hadn't done in a long time. We realized that we had been so caught up in the trappings of success that we had lost sight of what truly mattered: our relationship and our happiness. Susan's presence was still a looming shadow over our lives, but we learned to set boundaries. Mark had a heart-to-heart conversation with her, explaining how her constant interference was affecting our marriage. It was a difficult conversation, filled with tears and hurt feelings, but it was necessary. Susan was taken aback at first, but she gradually began to understand our perspective. Finding new joys with Susan's visits becoming less frequent and less intrusive, we started to find joy in the little things. We took long walks in our new neighborhood, discovering hidden gems we never knew existed. We cooked together, experimenting with new recipes and laughing at our color. Something we had never done in our old, exclusive community. Our new friends were kind, down-to-earth people who valued relationships over material possessions. They welcomed us into their lives, and we began to build a support network that helped us through the tough times. Mark and I also sought professional help to navigate the complexities of our relationship. Therapy provided us with tools to communicate better, understand each other's needs, and build a stronger foundation for our marriage. It wasn't easy, but we were committed to making it work. The turning point. One day, while cleaning out the attic of our new home, I stumbled upon an old photo album. It was filled with pictures from the early days of our relationship, before the big house and the pressures of success. As we flipped through the pages, we were reminded of the love and laughter that had brought us together. That evening, we sat on the porch, looking at the stars, and talked about our journey. We acknowledged the mistakes we had made and the lessons we had learned. We realized that our love had been tested, but it had also been strengthened. We made a promise to each other to never lose sight of what truly mattered again. Moving forward. Our life continued to evolve in ways we never expected. Susan, though still a part of our lives, had become less of a disruptive force. She began to respect our boundaries and even made efforts to improve her relationship with me. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Mark and I decided to focus on our passions and dreams. We started a small business together, something we had always talked about but never had the courage to pursue. It was a challenging but rewarding experience, and it brought us even closer. Our new home, though not as grand as the old one, became a symbol of our resilience and love. It was filled with laughter, warmth, and new memories. We had learned that true happiness didn't come from material possessions, but from the love and respect we had for each other. Conclusion. Looking back on our journey, I realized that Susan's interference, though painful, had been a catalyst for change. It forced us to confront our issues and rebuild our relationship on a stronger foundation. We learned to prioritize our happiness and stand up for ourselves, even in the face of familial pressure. Our new home, once a source of discomfort, had become a sanctuary. It wasn't the life I had imagined, but it was a life we built together, and that made it all the more precious. We had learned to find joy in the simple things, appreciate the love we had for each other, and build a future that was truly our own. In My Husband's Mother Made Me Leave Our Expensive 12K Month Home, here's what happened next. The narrator recounts a dramatic shift in her life when her overbearing mother-in-law, Susan, moves in and disrupts the harmony of their luxurious 12,000 a month home. Susan's constant criticisms and manipulative behavior create a rift between the narrator and her husband, Mark, leading to a move into a smaller, more modest home. Struggling with feelings of isolation and frustration, the narrator reaches a breaking point, forcing Mark to confront the toxic influence of his mother. Through difficult conversations and setting firm boundaries, the couple begins to rebuild their relationship and find new joys in their simpler life. The story is a poignant exploration of love, resilience, and the realization that true happiness comes not from material wealth, but from mutual respect and understanding. As they navigate the complexities of family dynamics and personal growth, the couple ultimately finds strength and unity in their new modest sanctuary.